They say you can't outrun your past. They're right. It finds you in a $15,000 ball gown and blood-red heels. Cassidy Sullivan was a combat medic who saved 17 soldiers during the Fort Bragg training disaster of 2023. Tonight she was a $12 an hour waitress trying to forget the 18 she couldn't. At Manhattan's Winter Gala, she watched an elderly woman collapse tripped by the city's elite for sport. While 200 guests filmed it for viral content, Cassidy's training overrode everything else. She didn't know the woman was Eleanor Valente, matriarch of New York's deadliest crime family. She didn't know saving Eleanor would paint a target on her back for every rival syndicate in the 5 boroughs. And she definitely didn't know Eleanor's son Dominic the Reaper. Valente would decide her life now belonged to him. This is the story of a soldier who thought she'd hung up her boots. The war had other plans. The Plaza Ballroom smelled like orchids and old money. Cassidy adjusted her polyester collar for the 100th time that evening, the fabric scratching her neck raw. 2 sizes too big, borrowed from another girl who'd quit last week without notice. The black flats from Payless were already carving blisters into her heels, but she couldn't afford to limp. Not tonight. Not when Henderson was circling like a hawk watching for any excuse to dock pay. Her sister Meredith needed dialysis on Monday. The home unit was failing. $1,800 for a replacement filter, or Mary would be back in the ER by Wednesday, racking up bills Cassidy couldn't touch, even if she worked triple shifts for a year. She wove through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes, invisible. That was the first rule Henderson drilled into every new hire. You are furniture. You are ghosts. You refill glasses, clear plates, and do not exist. The ballroom was a sea of velvet tuxedos and gowns that sparkled like crushed diamonds under the chandeliers. Ice sculptures shaped like swans melted slowly near the buffet. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner. The annual Winter Solstice Charity Ball, where Manhattan's wealthiest gathered to write tax-deductible checks and pretend they cared about children's hospitals. Cassidy knew exactly how much good those checks did. She'd worked pediatric wards during her clinical rotations. Most of these people spent more on their shoes than they donated. Near the center of the room, Anastasia Thornhill held court like a queen surrounded by trembling courtiers. 26 years old, daughter of a real estate empire with 2 million Instagram followers and a smile that never touched her eyes. She wore a white gown that probably cost more than Cassidy's annual rent. Her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo that required 3 stylists and 4 hours. Cassidy approached with fresh champagne, keeping her eyes down. Anastasia thrust her empty glass backward without looking. More Pinot Grigio. Of course, ma'am. Cassidy poured with steady hands despite the exhaustion trembling through her legs. She'd been on her feet for 11 hours. This was shift 3 of the day, morning prep at a diner in Queens, afternoon catering a corporate lunch in Midtown, and now this. She'd sleep for 4 hours if she was lucky, then wake up to do it again. The doors to the ballroom creaked open. Usually arrivals came with fanfare, an announcement, a ripple of recognition. This entrance was different, quiet, almost hesitant. An elderly woman stepped inside alone. She looked to be in her late 60s, maybe early 70s. She wasn't wearing the sleek, revealing cuts favored by the younger crowd, or the designer gowns dripping with jewels like the older society women. She wore a heavy, black vintage coat despite the warmth of the room, a silk scarf wrapped around her silver hair, and gripped a simple wooden cane. Orthopedic shoes, practical and ugly. She looked like someone's grandmother who'd wandered into the wrong building on her way to evening mass. The room didn't go silent immediately. It started with ripples, confused whispers spreading outward from the entrance. Who is that? Did security let the cleaning lady in through the front door? Oh my God! Look at her shoes. Are those orthopedics? The elderly woman took a few shaky steps onto the polished marble floor. Her dark eyes scanned the room as if searching for someone familiar, but she seemed disoriented, lost. Cassidy watched from her position near the champagne station. Something felt wrong. The woman's gait was unsteady, her grip on the cane too tight, her breathing shallow. As the woman passed Anastasia's circle, Anastasia extended one leg. It happened so quickly most people missed it. A subtle movement, barely noticeable. The tip of Anastasia's Louboutin caught the cane just enough to shift its trajectory. The elderly woman's cane slipped on the marble. Everything went slow. The woman gasped a dry, brittle sound and crumbled. She landed hard on her hip. Her purse spilled across the gleaming floor. A rosary, a few hard candies, an old photograph in a silver frame. For 3 seconds there was silence. Then Anastasia laughed. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound that cut through the quiet like breaking glass. Oops, clean up on aisle 5. She covered her mouth with a manicured hand, her eyes bright with malicious amusement. I think the homeless shelter is down the block, sweetie. The laughter spread like infection. Men chuckled into their drinks. Women smirked behind their champagne flutes. Not a single person moved to help. They stood there in their designer clothes, watching an old woman struggle to push herself up, her face contorted in pain and humiliation. Henderson rushed over, but not to assist. He spoke into his headset, his face red with irritation. Security, get this vagrant out of here. She's ruining the aesthetic. Cassidy didn't think. She dropped her tray. The crash echoed like a gunshot. 30 crystal flutes shattered against the marble. Champagne sprayed across the hems of nearby gowns, soaking into expensive fabric. You idiot! Henderson's voice was a whip crack, but Cassidy ignored him. She ran to the elderly woman, dropping to her knees in the spreading puddle of champagne and broken glass. Shards cut through her cheap stockings, biting into her skin. She didn't care. Ma'am, are you okay? Cassidy's voice was soft, trembling with rage at the people circling like vultures. Don't try to move too fast, I've got you. The elderly woman looked up. Her eyes were obsidian black, sharp and intelligent despite the pain etched into her weathered face. She studied Cassidy with an intensity that felt almost clinical, analyzing, measuring, cataloging. I tripped. Her accent was thick, unmistakably Italian. Old country. Not the Americanized version you heard in pizza shops. My hip. I know. Cassidy pulled off her own catering jacket and wrapped it around the woman's shoulders. The jacket was thin polyester, but it was something. Warmth. Dignity. I'm going to help you up. Okay? Just lean on me. What do you think you're doing? Anastasia's shriek cut through the murmurs. You splashed champagne on my Louboutins. You clumsy little rat. Henderson arrived, grabbing Cassidy by the shoulder and yanking her backward. Get away from her. You're fired, Sullivan. Get your things and get out. Security is handling this trash. Cassidy shrugged off his grip, her eyes blazing. She's hurt. What is wrong with you people? She's an old woman. She's a trespasser. Henderson spat the words. And you are unemployed. Security. 2 burly guards in blazers stepped forward, reaching for the elderly woman with hands that looked more accustomed to breaking bones than offering assistance. Don't touch her. Cassidy's voice came out harder than she intended. She positioned herself between the guards and the woman, shielding her with her own body. Call an ambulance, you cowards. The elderly woman gripped Cassidy's wrist. Her hold was surprisingly strong for someone so frail. Bambina, it's okay. It's not okay. Cassidy felt tears stinging her eyes, hot and furious. They can't treat you like this. Oh, look. Anastasia pulled out her iPhone, aiming it at Cassidy and the fallen woman, the trash protecting the garbage. This is going viral. #charity case. The room erupted in laughter. A coliseum of cruelty. Phones raised, cameras clicking. 200 people watching a young woman kneel in broken glass to help someone they deemed unworthy. Then the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The heavy double doors at the main entrance didn't just open. They slammed against the walls with violence that shook the chandeliers, sending crystal pendants swaying and chiming like warning bells. The laughter died instantly. 6 men walked in. They moved with military precision, wearing suits that cost more than most cars. But they didn't look like wedding guests or corporate executives. They looked like predators. Hands hovered near waistbands where bulges suggested concealed weapons. Their eyes swept the room in coordinated patterns, exits, threats, targets. They formed a perimeter instantly. But it was the 7th man who sucked the air out of the ballroom. He was tall, over 6'3", with broad shoulders that strained against a charcoal 3-piece suit. His hair was dark, slicked back with precision. His face was a mask of cold, terrifying fury. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against tanned skin. He walked into the room and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. People stepped back clutching their chests, faces drained of color. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered, unnoticed. "That's—" The whisper came from somewhere near Cassidy. "That's Dominic Valente." The name hit the room like a bomb. Dominic Valente. The Reaper. Head of the Valente crime family. The man the FBI had been trying to pin down for a decade. The man whose name appeared in sealed indictments and disappeared witnesses. The man who controlled the ports, the unions, the construction contracts that built half of Manhattan. He didn't look at the guests. Didn't acknowledge Anastasia or Henderson or the 200 phones recording. He walked straight toward the center of the room, his eyes locked on the floor. On his mother. Cassidy froze. She was still kneeling, holding the elderly woman. She saw expensive Italian leather shoes stop inches from her knees. Slowly she looked up. Dominic Valente looked down at her. His eyes were the same obsidian black as the elderly woman's, but where hers held pain, his held violence so raw it made Cassidy's breath catch in her throat. Then the monster fell to his knees. He ignored the champagne soaking into his suit trousers, ignored the glass. He reached out his hands, shaking slightly, and touched the elderly woman's face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so dangerous. "Mama." His voice was a low rumble that carried across the silent ballroom. "Mama, are you hurt?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Anastasia's phone slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble. The homeless trespasser wasn't a vagrant. She was Eleanor Valente, the matriarch, the only person Dominic Valente loved, the only person who could tell the devil what to do. Eleanor looked at her son. Then she looked at Cassidy. She patted Cassidy's hand with surprising warmth. "I am hurt, Dominic. I fell." Her voice was stronger now, steadier. "But this angel helped me when the others laughed." Dominic slowly turned his head. He didn't stand up yet. He just rotated his neck, scanning the crowd with methodical precision. His gaze landed on Henderson, who was trembling so violently his knees knocked together audibly. Then his eyes slid to Anastasia. They laughed. Dominic's question was soft, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more terrifying. They laughed. Eleanor confirmed. "And this man—" She nodded toward Henderson. "He fired her for helping me." Dominic stood. He towered over Cassidy. He extended one hand toward her. "Stand up." The command was absolute, not unkind but leaving no room for refusal. Cassidy took his hand. His grip was warm, calloused. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly as if she weighed nothing. "What is your name, Cassidy?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Cassidy Sullivan. Cassidy Sullivan." Dominic repeated it like he was memorizing scripture, committing it to permanent memory. He took off his own suit jacket, expensive wool, perfectly tailored, and placed it over his mother's shoulders, layering it over Cassidy's cheap polyester one. He turned to the room. "Lock the doors." The heavy thud of locks engaging echoed through the silent ballroom like the ceiling of a tomb. "Nobody leaves until I find out who tripped my mother." The atmosphere shifted from celebration to hostage situation in less than 60 seconds. The band stopped playing mid-note. Waiters pressed themselves against the walls trying to become invisible. Guests stood frozen champagne flutes trembling in manicured hands. Dominic stood in the center of the circle, one hand resting protectively on his mother's shoulder. As she sat in a velvet chair, one of his men had rushed over. Eleanor's posture was regal, despite her ordeal, her dark eyes watching the crowd with something between contempt and curiosity. "My mother came here tonight to donate anonymously to the Children's Hospital Fund." Dominic's voice projected without effort, filling every corner of the vast room. "She likes to see where the money goes. She walked in the front door and you treated her like a stray dog." He walked slowly toward Anastasia, each step deliberate, measured. Anastasia was pale, her lip quivering. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of prey cornered by a predator. "I didn't know." Her voice cracked. "Mr. Valente, please." It was a misunderstanding. She looked poor. Dominic stopped inches from her face. He smelled of tobacco, expensive cologne, and something darker. Gunpowder, maybe. Or blood. She looked poor. He repeated the words flatly without inflection. And that made it funny. No, I didn't mean I saw the video. Dominic nodded toward one of his men who was holding Anastasia's phone. He'd snatched it from the floor moments earlier. You were live streaming. Clean up on aisle 5, correct? Anastasia couldn't breathe. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her spray tan. You have 5 seconds to apologize to my mother. And if I don't believe you mean it, you will leave this party through the window. We're on the 42nd floor. Anastasia threw herself at Eleanor's feet. It was pathetic, desperate. Mrs. Valente, I'm so sorry. I'm so stupid. Please forgive me. I'll donate everything. I'll do anything. Eleanor looked at the crying girl with eyes of steel. She didn't say a word. She just looked away, dismissing Anastasia as if she were nothing more than trash on the sidewalk. Dominic turned to Henderson. The manager was sweating so profusely his collar was soaked through. And you fired the only person with a soul in this room. Company policy, sir? Henderson's voice came out as a squeak. She dropped a tray. I can hire her back. With a raise. A big raise. She won't be working for you anymore. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. He turned back to Cassidy. Cassidy stood near the paramedics who had just arrived, escorted by Valente's men. She felt dizzy. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaky and disoriented. This was too much. Too fast. Too dangerous. Dominic approached her. The menacing aura vanished, replaced by something else. Curiosity. Intensity. My mother says you shielded her. That you stood between her and security. I thought they were going to hurt her. Cassidy's voice shook. I didn't know they were yours. You risked your job. You risked your safety. For a stranger. Dominic studied her, the dirty uniform, the cheap shoes, the messy hair. Then he looked at her eyes. Green, wide, honest. I have a debt to pay to you, Cassidy Sullivan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Black metal with gold embossing. A phone number. No name. Go home. My driver is outside. He will take you anywhere you want to go. Do not take the subway tonight. I can't. Cassidy heard herself say the words before her brain caught up. I have to finish my shift or I don't get paid for the night. I need the money. Dominic stared at her. You're worried about $50 when you're standing in front of me. It's $120. Cassidy lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. And yes, my sister needs medicine. Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Respect. Surprise. Maybe both. He snapped his fingers. One of his guards approached with a briefcase. Dominic opened it. Stacks of cash neatly banded. Hundreds. He pulled out a bundle, at least $10,000, and held it out. Take it. Cassidy looked at the money. Then she looked at Dominic. She stepped back. No. The room gasped again. You didn't say no to Dominic Valente. Excuse me, I didn't help her for money. Cassidy's voice was quiet but firm. I helped her because it was right. If I take your money, it makes it a transaction. It cheapens it. Dominic stood frozen. He had bought judges, politicians, CEOs. He'd never met anyone who refused his money. From her chair, Eleanor let out a soft laugh. She is proud, Dominic, like your father was. Dominic slowly lowered the money. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Very well. He turned to his men. Escort Miss Sullivan home. Ensure she is safe. If anyone, he glared at the room, anyone bothers her, they answer to me. He turned back to Cassidy. His expression was unreadable. This isn't over, Cassidy. We will talk again. Cassidy was ushered out of the ballroom by two men who looked like they chewed bricks for breakfast. As the doors closed behind her, she heard Dominic's voice addressing the room one final time. Now let's discuss the damages to my mother's dignity. Who wants to go first? Cassidy sat in the back of a Bentley that cost more than the apartment building she lived in. The leather seats were heated. The city lights blurred past tinted windows. She lived in a crumbling walk-up in Astoria, Queens. When the car pulled up, the contrast was stark. Graffiti on the walls. trash on the sidewalk, a broken streetlight flickering overhead. The driver, a man named Marco with a face like carved granite, opened the door for her. "Mr. Valente insists you take this card, Miss Sullivan." He held out the black metal card again. He said if she refuses the money, tell her the favor remains. Cassidy took the card this time. She slipped it into her pocket. She walked up the 4 flights of stairs, her legs screaming in protest. Each step felt like climbing a mountain. She unlocked the door to apartment 4B. The smell of antiseptic hit her immediately. Her sister Meredith was asleep on the couch hooked up to the home dialysis machine. It was an older model, loud and clunky. The replacement parts were expensive. The whole unit needed upgrading, but insurance denied the claim. Again. Meredith was only 19, but her skin was gray, her body frail. Chronic kidney disease since she was 14. No donor match, no transplant options. Just dialysis 3 times a week and a slow decline. Cassidy sat on the floor beside the couch and wept. She had lost her job. Henderson would blacklist her with every catering company in the city. She had no money coming in. Mary's next treatment was Monday and the filter was failing. They'd have to go to the ER. More bills she couldn't pay. She had stood up to a room full of monsters and gained nothing but a metal card and a terrifying memory. Or so she thought. The pounding on the door woke Cassidy at 7 in the morning. She'd slept 3 hours, maybe less. Her body ached. The cuts on her knees from the broken glass throbbed. She panicked. Had the landlord come for rent early? Had Henderson sent police to press charges for the broken champagne flutes? She opened the door, clutching her robe tight. Standing in the hallway was not the landlord. A man in an expensive suit held a legal portfolio. Behind him stood 2 movers in company uniforms. "Miss Cassidy Sullivan." "Yes, my name is Harrison Blackwood. I am the personal attorney for Mrs. Eleanor Valente." Cassidy's stomach dropped. "I don't understand." "Mrs. Valente was quite taken with you, Cassidy." Harrison's smile was practiced professional. "She did some research last night. She knows about your sister. She knows about your debts. She has no right to—" "She has every right," Harrison interrupted gently, "because as of this morning the Valente Foundation has purchased this building." Cassidy's mouth fell open. "The building? This apartment building? And the one next to it? And the hospital where your sister receives her primary care?" He handed her a thick envelope. "Mr. Valente offers you a job, not as a waitress. He needs a personal security specialist for his mother. You have military medical training. The salary is—" He paused, checking the papers. $15,000 per month plus full medical benefits for immediate family. Cassidy leaned against the doorframe. Her knees buckled. "There is one condition." Harrison's face turned serious. "What you must live at the Valente estate, for your safety. Because now that the world knows you are under Dominic Valente's protection, you have a target on your back." Cassidy looked past Harrison into the apartment. Meredith was still sleeping on the couch, pale and fragile. The dialysis machine beeped its monotonous rhythm. "When do we leave?" The Valente estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. Located in the deepest, most wooded part of the Hamptons, it sat behind 12-foot iron gates topped with spikes. As the Bentley rolled through the entrance, Cassidy saw armed guards patrolling the perimeter with German shepherds. Cameras on every tree, motion sensors hidden in the landscaping. Cassidy gripped Meredith's hand. Mary was wide-eyed, staring out the window at manicured lawns that seemed to stretch for miles. "Is this real?" Mary whispered, clutching her portable oxygen tank. "Cass, are we being kidnapped?" "We're being hired," Cassidy said, though she wasn't entirely sure herself. "Just remember we stick together." The car stopped in front of a limestone mansion that rivaled historic estates. The massive oak doors opened. A line of staff stood waiting, housekeepers, groundskeepers, security personnel in crisp uniforms. But standing at the top of the stairs alone was Dominic Valente. He had changed out of his suit into a black button-down shirt and dark jeans, but he looked no less dangerous. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing tattoos that wrapped around his forearms, intricate dark ink that looked like thorns intertwined with religious iconography. Crosses, Latin phrases, a rosary wound around barbed wire. He walked down the stairs as Marco opened the car door. Dominic didn't look at Cassidy. He looked straight at Meredith. "You must be Meredith." His voice was softer than Cassidy had heard it at the gala. Mary nodded, intimidated. "Yes, sir. My mother has prepared the East Wing for you. It has been equipped with hospital-grade air filtration and a dedicated power generator for your equipment. Dr. Ariel Thorne, the best nephrologist in the state, will be here at 4 p.m. to review your case." Cassidy stepped out of the car, stunned. "You did all that in 12 hours. Dominic finally turned his gaze to Cassidy. The air between them crackled with something unnameable. "I don't do half measures, Miss Sullivan. If you are under my roof, your problems are my problems, and I solve problems quickly." "Thank you." The words came out barely above a whisper. "Don't thank me yet." Dominic's eyes darkened. "This isn't a vacation. You're here to work. My mother is stubborn. She refuses medication. She thinks she's invincible. Your job is to keep her alive. If she falls again, if she misses a dose, you answer to me. I can handle it." Cassidy lifted her chin, meeting his stare. "We'll see." He turned and walked back up the stairs. Over his shoulder he called out, "Welcome to hell, Miss Sullivan." The massive doors closed behind him with a heavy thud that echoed across the grounds. Cassidy stood there holding Mary's hand, staring at the fortress that was now her home. In the distance, beyond the manicured gardens and the armed patrols, she could hear wolves howling in the woods, or maybe it was just the wind. The East Wing of the Valente estate had better medical equipment than most hospitals. Meredith's new room overlooked gardens that bloomed even in December, heated greenhouses maintained year-round by a staff Cassidy never saw, but whose work was everywhere. The dialysis machine was state-of-the-art, silent, efficient. No more beeping at 3 in the morning, no more filter failures. Mary's color returned within 48 hours. Cassidy's job, however, was considerably harder than advertised. Eleanor Valente was a force of nature wrapped in vintage Chanel and armed with a wooden cane she wielded like a weapon. She hated being treated like an invalid. On day 3, Cassidy caught her trying to hide blood pressure pills in a potted fern. "Spit it out." Cassidy held out her hand, standing between Eleanor and the library door. Eleanor glared from her velvet armchair, her dark eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "It is just a vitamin. It's a diuretic. And with your blood pressure readings this morning, it's the difference between stable and stroke." "Spit it out." Eleanor sighed dramatically and spat the tablet into a tissue. Then she smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. "You are tougher than you look." "Good. Dominic needs someone tough. I'm not here for your son, Mrs. Valente. I'm your employee." "For now." Eleanor's smile turned knowing, almost mischievous. "The women he dates models, influencers, girls like that Anastasia creature. Empty heads, empty hearts. You are different." Cassidy focused on organizing the pill organizer, color-coding the medications by time of day. She didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Because part of her, the part she refused to acknowledge, wondered what it would be like to be seen as more than hired help. Dominic himself was a ghost in the estate. He left before dawn and returned long after dark. When he was home, the entire atmosphere shifted. Staff moved quieter. Guards stood sharper. Even the air felt heavier, charged with an energy that made Cassidy's instincts scream danger. She didn't see him for 5 full days, until the night she couldn't sleep. It was 2 in the morning on December 21st. Cassidy had been at the estate for 6 days. She'd checked on Mary 3 times already, old habits from deployments where she'd wake every 90 minutes to verify her battle buddies were still breathing. The nightmares were worse here. Quieter house meant louder screams in her head. She went down to the industrial kitchen for warm milk, an old remedy her mother used to make. The house was vast, shadowed, silent. She turned the corner and froze. Dominic sat at the marble island, a bottle of whiskey open in front of him, a half-empty glass in his hand. He was shirtless. Cassidy's breath caught. Not from attraction, though, that was there undeniable, but from shock. His back was a road map of violence. Scars crisscrossed his skin like a topographical map of war. Knife slashes, bullet wounds, burns. some old and faded, others newer, still pink and raised. His body told the story of a life lived in constant combat. "Don't run away." His voice rumbled through the kitchen. He didn't turn around. "I can hear your heartbeat from here, Cassidy." Cassidy hesitated, then walked slowly into the kitchen, keeping her distance. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted milk." Dominic swiveled on the stool. His chest was just as scarred, a canvas of brutality. But what caught Cassidy's attention was a fresh bruise on his ribs, purpling and ugly, spreading across his left side like spilled ink. "Rough day at the office." Her voice came out drier than intended, a defense mechanism. Dominic huffed a sound that might have been a laugh. "Hostile takeover. Negotiations broke down. Does the other guy look worse? The other guy isn't breathing." Silence stretched between them. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Cassidy felt a strange pull toward him. He looked exhausted. Not just tired, but soul-weary, like a soldier who'd been fighting too long without relief. "You're bleeding." Cassidy pointed to a cut on his bicep, still seeping. "It's nothing. Sit still." Cassidy went to the first aid cabinet she'd organized for Eleanor's medications. She grabbed antiseptic and bandages, then walked back to him. Dominic watched her approach, but didn't move as she stepped between his spread knees. "This will sting." "I don't feel sting." She poured antiseptic on a cotton pad and dabbed the cut. He didn't flinch. His muscles were rock hard under her fingers, radiating heat like a furnace. Being this close to him felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with violence. "Why did you really take us in?" Cassidy asked softly, applying the bandage with steady hands. "It wasn't just because I helped your mother. You don't strike me as a charitable man." Dominic looked down at her. His hand moved almost involuntarily, hovering near her waist, before he gripped the edge of the stool instead, knuckles white. "You're right, I'm not charitable. I'm possessive." Cassidy looked up, locking eyes with him. "Green meeting black. What does that mean?" "It means in my world loyalty is the rarest currency. You showed loyalty to a stranger who had nothing to offer you. That makes you rare. And I collect rare things. Is that all I am? A collectible?" Dominic leaned in. His face was inches from hers. She could smell the whiskey and something metallic, blood, probably his own. "No, you're a liability. Because looking at you makes me want to burn the world down just to keep you warm. And I can't afford that distraction." Cassidy's breath hitched. The air between them crackled with tension so thick she could taste it. Dominic abruptly stood, backing away from her. The moment shattered like dropped glass. "Go to bed, Cassidy." His voice turned cold, distant. "Lock your door." He grabbed the whiskey bottle and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Cassidy standing there alone, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged animal trying to escape. The fragile truce between Cassidy and Dominic lasted exactly 3 more days. On Christmas Day, Eleanor insisted on attending the opening of a new restaurant in Manhattan, Il Paradiso, owned by the Valente family. A legitimate business, or as legitimate as anything connected to organized crime could be. "It is tradition." Eleanor adjusted her diamond earrings in the mirror, her reflection regal despite her age. "I must make an appearance, and you, Kara, are coming with me. I don't think Dominic would approve." Cassidy stood near the door, uncomfortable in the formal dress Eleanor had bought for her, a deep emerald silk that hugged her curves and left her back exposed. "Dominic is not the boss of me," Eleanor scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Besides, he will be there. We will be safe." That's what worried Cassidy. Being in the same room with Dominic after the kitchen encounter felt like standing too close to a live wire. Eleanor smiled knowingly, reading Cassidy's expression with the ease of someone who'd spent 70 years decoding people. "You are afraid of him. I'm cautious around dangerous things. It's called survival instinct." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But do not let it make you small." When Cassidy walked down the grand staircase an hour later, Dominic was waiting in the foyer, checking his watch. He looked up. He stopped checking his watch. His eyes swept over her, devouring every detail. For a second, just one unguarded second, his mask dropped and pure raw hunger flashed across his face. Then it slammed back down, replaced by cold control. "Put a coat on." The words came out harsh, clipped. "It's 70 degrees outside," Cassidy argued, descending the last few steps. "I don't care." Put a coat on. You're drawing attention. That is the point. Eleanor appeared on the landing, hooking her arm through Cassidy's with surprising strength. She is beautiful. Let her shine. The ride to Manhattan was tense. Dominic sat across from them in the limousine, typing furiously on his phone. But Cassidy felt his eyes on her every time she looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. Il Paradiso was spectacular. Glass walls, candlelight, and the elite of New York's underworld mingling with politicians and judges who pretended not to know who signed their campaign checks. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a building in Tribeca, offering panoramic views of the city. Dominic guided them to a VIP booth in the back, positioned so he could see every entrance and exit. He sat Cassidy next to him. His body heat was a constant presence impossible to ignore. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't accept drinks. Don't go to the bathroom alone. I thought we were safe here." Cassidy whispered back, hyper-aware of his proximity. "You are never safe when you're with me." Dinner proceeded smoothly for the first hour. Eleanor held court like a queen, greeting old family friends with warmth and rivals with icy politeness. Cassidy stayed quiet, observing. She catalogued exits, counted security personnel, both Valentes and others, and noted which guests carried concealed weapons poorly. Old training died hard. Then Vincent Caruso arrived. Caruso was the underboss of a rival family, a greasy man with too much hair gel and a loud, braying laugh that cut through conversations like nails on a chalkboard. He wore a suit that cost more than most cars, but somehow still looked cheap on him. He walked straight to their table, ignoring the glares from Dominic's security. "Eleanor," Caruso boomed, leaning over the table with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, looking ancient as ever. "Vincent." Eleanor's voice could have frozen vodka. "I see you haven't been indicted yet. Slow year for the FBI." Caruso laughed, but his gaze drifted to Cassidy. He licked his lips, a gesture so blatant it made Cassidy's skin crawl. "And who is this fresh meat? I didn't know you had a new mistress, Dominic. Usually you go for the plastic ones. This one looks homegrown." Dominic's hand clenched around his steak knife. His knuckles turned white. "Walk away, Vincent." "What, can't I introduce myself?" Caruso reached out his hand, aiming for Cassidy's bare shoulder. Before his finger could graze her skin, Dominic moved. It was a blur of motion. 1 second, Dominic was seated. The next, he was standing, and the steak knife was embedded deep into the wooden table right between Vincent's fingers, so close the blade shaved hair off his knuckle. The restaurant went silent. Forks stopped mid-bite. Conversations died. Touch her, and you lose the hand. Dominic's whisper was deadly calm, more terrifying than any shout. Vincent pulled his hand back, his face flushing red with rage and humiliation. "You're crazy, Valente. Starting a war over a waitress." "Yeah, we know who she is. The little charity case." Vincent sneered at Cassidy, his eyes full of contempt. "Tell me, sweetheart, how much is he paying you to warm his bed? Or do you do it for free because you like the bad boys?" Cassidy didn't shrink. She stood slowly, maintaining eye contact with Vincent. She picked up her glass of heavy red wine. "He pays me for my loyalty." Her voice was clear, carrying across the silent restaurant. "Something you clearly can't buy, seeing as your own bodyguards are looking at you with disgust." She splashed the wine directly into Vincent's face. The red liquid dripped down his expensive white shirt, staining it like blood. Vincent roared and lunged for her. Dominic didn't just stop him, he destroyed him. He caught Vincent by the throat, lifted him off the ground, impossible strength for someone who'd been injured days ago, and slammed him onto the adjacent table. Dishes shattered. Women screamed. The violence was sudden, brutal, absolute. Dominic's gun was out in a flash, the barrel pressed against Vincent's forehead. "Give me a reason. Please give me a reason." Dominic's voice was almost pleading, like he wanted Vincent to resist. Armed men, both Valentes and Caruso's, had weapons drawn, a Mexican standoff in a 5-star restaurant. The air vibrated with the promise of bloodshed. Eleanor remained seated, calmly sipping her water as if violence was simply part of dinner ambiance. "Dominic." Her voice cut through the chaos, soft but commanding. "Not here. The risotto is excellent. Do not ruin the chef's night." Dominic stared at Vincent, his eyes burning with dark fire. Slowly he lowered the gun, but he leaned close to Vincent's ear voice, low enough that only Vincent and Cassidy standing nearby could hear. "If you ever look at her again, I will cut your eyes out. If you speak her name, I will cut your tongue out. Get out." He dropped Vincent. The rival underboss scrambled up, humiliated, dripping wine like wounds. He pointed a shaking finger at Dominic. "This isn't over, Valente. You just signed your death warrant." Vincent stormed out with his entourage, leaving destruction in his wake. Dominic turned to Cassidy. She was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her system in waves. He grabbed her hand grip too tight and pulled her toward the exit. "We're leaving. Now." "Dominic, you're hurting me." Cassidy gasped as he dragged her through the kitchen toward the back exit, weaving between shocked chefs and waitstaff. He didn't stop until they were in the alleyway behind the restaurant. The cold night air hit their faces a shock after the warmth inside. Steam rose from vents. Trash bins lined the brick walls. Dominic pinned her against the wall, not violently but trapping her, his body pressing her into the bricks, one hand beside her head, breathing hard, pupils dilated. "Are you insane?" he shouted, his control finally breaking. "You threw wine at Vincent Caruso. Do you have a death wish? He insulted you. He insulted me," Cassidy yelled back, her own temper flaring. "I wasn't going to let him talk to us like that. You don't understand." Dominic slammed his fist against the wall next to her head, making her flinch. "These aren't rude customers at a diner, Cassidy. These are killers. Vincent would have put a bullet in your brain without blinking. I felt safe because you were there." Cassidy's voice cracked, tears of frustration and fear streaming down her face. "I knew you wouldn't let him hurt me." The confession hung in the air between them like smoke. Dominic stared at her, his chest heaving. "You trust me?" "Yes." "You shouldn't." "Why?" "Because you're a monster." Cassidy reached up her hand, trembling, and touched the scar through his eyebrow with gentle fingers. "I don't see a monster. I see a man who just defended his family." Dominic closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers. He was shaking. "You're making me weak, Cassidy. You make me want to be a man I can't be. Maybe you don't have to be the Reaper all the time." Her whisper was barely audible. Dominic opened his eyes. The violence was gone, replaced by an intensity far more dangerous. "If I kiss you now, I won't be able to stop. And if I don't stop, I will ruin you. I will drag you into this darkness and you will never get out. I'm already in the dark. Maybe I want to be there with you." Dominic let out a groan, a sound of defeat and desire intertwined. He cupped her face in his large, rough hands and crashed his lips onto hers. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, consuming. He tasted like wine and fury and something darker she couldn't name. Cassidy wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, matching his intensity. For a moment the alleyway disappeared. The guns, the threats, the danger, it all vanished. There was only heat and need and the feeling of finally surrendering to something inevitable. But just as quickly the sound of tires screeching shattered the moment. An SUV squealed around the corner of the alley, headlights blinding. Automatic windows rolled down. The barrels of submachine guns poked out. Dominic's instincts took over instantly. He didn't think, he reacted. He threw Cassidy to the ground, covering her body with his own. The world exploded in gunfire. Bullets chewed up the brick wall where they'd been standing seconds ago, sending debris raining down on them like hail. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar that seemed to last forever but was probably only 5 seconds. The SUV sped off into the night, tires smoking. Silence returned to the alley, broken only by the ringing in Cassidy's ears. "Dominic." Her whisper was terrified. She felt something warm and wet seeping through her dress, soaking into the silk. Dominic rolled off her, slowly landing on his back on the dirty pavement. He looked up at the stars, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Are you okay?" His voice was weak, strained. Cassidy scrambled over to him. She looked at his chest. The white shirt under his suit was turning red, fast. 2 entry wounds, one in his left shoulder, one lower near his ribs. Exit wounds in his back meant the bullets went through. "Oh my God." Cassidy's training kicked in automatically. She pressed her hands against the wounds, applying pressure. Dominic, stay with me. He reached up with a bloody hand and touched her cheek, staining her skin red. I told you I'm dangerous to be around. He coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. His eyes rolled back. His hand fell limp. Help, Cassidy screamed into the empty alley, her voice tearing her throat raw. Somebody help. The next hours were a kaleidoscope of terror and violence. Black SUVs arrived, Valente's men, not enemies. Marco's face drained of color when he saw his boss bleeding out. Sirens screamed in the distance, but they weren't going to a hospital. Not a normal one. They drove to a nondescript brick building in Queens that looked like a veterinary clinic from outside. Inside, it was a state-of-the-art trauma center staffed by doctors who knew better than to ask questions and were paid enough to ensure their silence. Cassidy refused to leave Dominic's side. She held his hand while they cut the expensive suit off his body. She watched as they intubated him, forcing air into his lungs with a machine. She was covered in his blood. It dried sticky and dark on her hands, her ruined dress. Miss Sullivan, you need to step out. A grim-faced surgeon tried to pull her away. We need to operate now. I'm not leaving him. Cassidy's voice was hollow shock settling over her like frost. Cassidy. Eleanor had arrived, still wearing her jewels from dinner, leaning heavily on her cane. Her face was composed statue-like, but her eyes held a mother's ultimate agony. Come with me, Bambina. He needs surgeons now. We need to handle the rest. Eleanor led Cassidy into a windowless waiting room that felt more like a bunker. Leather chairs, stale coffee, the smell of fear. Within an hour, the room filled with men in suits. Captains of the Valente crime family, faces like thunderclouds, hands hovering near weapons. Leading them was Salvatore Romano, Sal Dominic's underboss. 50 years old, built like a fire hydrant with a perpetually suspicious scowl. He'd never liked Cassidy. Saw her as a weakness, a crack in the armor. Sal walked straight up to Cassidy, ignoring Eleanor. What happened? His voice was a bark, sharp and accusatory. Where was the security gap? How did Caruso's men know the exit route? Cassidy was shaking, holding lukewarm coffee she couldn't taste. I don't know. We went out the back because Vincent caused a scene inside. Dominic was just trying to get me out safely. Trying to get you out safe, Sal repeated with disgust, turning to the other captains. See, I told Dominic. Soft spots get you killed. He took 2 slugs meant for a waitress. Watch your mouth, Salvatore. Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a blade. She didn't raise it, but everyone froze. You are speaking to the woman my son took a bullet for. That buys her respect in this family. With all due respect, Donna Eleanor, Sal's face reddened. Dominic is on an operating table because of her. We are vulnerable. The wolves know the lion is down. We need to hit back at Caruso tonight. Burn his whole operation to the ground. The room murmured agreement. The thirst for blood was palpable, filling the space like humidity. No. Cassidy's voice was quiet, but it carried. The room went dead silent. Sal looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Excuse me. Cassidy stood up. She was still covered in Dominic's blood. It gave her a horrific sort of authority. Dominic isn't dead. He's still in command. And until he wakes up, nobody makes a move that starts an all-out war in New York without proof. Proof? Sal laughed bitterly. Caruso threatened him to his face 10 minutes before the shooting. What more proof do you need? Exactly. Cassidy's mind was racing despite the trauma pieces falling into place. It's too sloppy. Caruso is loud and stupid, but he isn't suicidal. Attacking Dominic right after publicly threatening him makes him the obvious suspect. Too obvious. She looked around at the hardened criminals. Whoever did this knew our exact exit route. They knew exactly when we'd be in that alley. That wasn't Caruso getting lucky. That was an inside job. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. To suggest a traitor in the Valente inner circle was a death sentence in itself. Sal stepped close to her, invading her space, using his bulk to intimidate. Are you accusing my men of disloyalty, little girl? You better be careful. You don't have Dominic to hide behind right now. I'm not hiding. Cassidy met his gaze without flinching. I'm telling you that if you go after Caruso tonight, the real traitor is going to laugh while you waste ammunition on the wrong target. Eleanor stood beside Cassidy, her cane tapping the floor with finality. "She is right, Salvatore. My son is methodical. He would want to know the truth before we paint the streets red. We wait. We lock down the territory. And we find the leak." Sal looked between the formidable matriarch and the defiant young woman covered in blood. He cursed under his breath in Italian. "Fine. We lock down. But if Dominic dies," he pointed at Cassidy, "this is on you. The surgery took 9 hours. Dominic survived, but the damage was severe. One bullet had nicked his left lung. The other had lodged dangerously close to his spine. The surgeons put him in a medically induced coma to let his body heal without the stress of consciousness. For 3 days, Cassidy didn't leave the underground hospital. She slept in the chair beside his bed when exhaustion finally claimed her. She learned the rhythm of the ventilator breathing for him, steady, mechanical, relentless. The mighty Dominic Valente looked human now, pale, vulnerable, covered in wires and tubes that kept him tethered to life. But even in stillness he possessed a gravity that drew her in like orbit around a dying star. On the third night, sitting in the dim light of monitoring equipment, Cassidy took his limp hand in hers. His skin was cool, nothing like the furnace heat she remembered from the kitchen. "You have to wake up." Her whisper was fierce, angry almost. "You promised me we'd talk again. You promised me I wasn't safe with you. Prove it. Wake up and be dangerous again. Because I don't know how to do this without you." She laid her head on the mattress near his hand and finally let herself cry. Not the shocked tears from the alley or the terrified ones from the operating room. These were different, deeper. She realized with startling clarity that she wasn't just grateful to him. She wasn't just loyal. She was in love with the monster who had saved her life. And the monster was currently defenseless. Outside the hospital room, the city was brewing. Attacks on Valente shipping containers at the docks. A fire at one of their warehouses in Jersey, arson clearly but untraceable. Someone was testing the waters, seeing if the organization would crumble without the Reaper. Cassidy dried her tears with the back of her hand. Crying wouldn't save him. Finding the truth would. She thought back to that night, the restaurant, the specific exit. Who knew Dominic, obviously? Marco, the driver, the restaurant manager, and whoever handled Dominic's schedule and security routes. She needed access to Dominic's phone. It was in a plastic effects bag on the side table along with his watch. His wallet and the gold crucifix he wore around his neck, the only jewelry she'd ever seen on him. She took out the phone, locked naturally. Military-grade encryption, probably. "What would be your passcode?" She studied his sleeping face, the ventilator hissing its mechanical breath. It wouldn't be a birthday. Too obvious. It wouldn't be something simple. He was too careful for that. She tried the date of his father's death information she'd overheard Eleanor mention. Incorrect. She tried Eleanor's birthday. Incorrect. Then she remembered the kitchen, the way he looked at her, the way he said loyalty was the rarest currency, the way his hands shook when he touched her face in the alley. She typed in December 15th, 2024, the date they met, the date of the gala. The phone unlocked. Cassidy's heart skipped a beat. He used the day he met her as the code to his empire. The implications of that simple fact threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to focus. She navigated to his secure messaging app, military-grade, end-to-end, encrypted. She scrolled through messages from that night looking for anything about the restaurant, the security detail, the exit routes. There. A message sent at 8:15 p.m. while they were still eating appetizers. It listed the restaurant name table location and the predetermined emergency exit route via the North Alley. Detailed. Specific. Exactly what someone planning an ambush would need. The recipient was listed only as Asset 0. But it wasn't the recipient that made Cassidy's blood run cold. It was the sender. The message hadn't originated from Dominic's phone. It had been forwarded to his phone as an FYI from his personal attorney, Harrison Blackwood, the man who had brought her the job offer, the man who smiled kindly and handled Eleanor's estate, the man everyone trusted. Dominic hadn't set up the ambush. Harrison had shared the security details with someone else, someone who wanted Dominic dead. Cassidy felt sick. She dropped the phone on the bed just as the door to the room opened. Harrison Blackwood stood in the doorway holding a bouquet of white lilies. He looked impeccable in his suit, his expression one of practiced concern. "Cassidy, my dear, how is he?" His voice was smooth, professional. "And how are you holding up? You look exhausted." Cassidy stared at him. She saw the snake behind the smile now, the cold calculation in his eyes that she'd missed before because she'd been too overwhelmed, too grateful. "He's stable." Her voice came out tight, controlled. She casually placed her hand over Dominic's phone, hiding it. "Why are you here, Harrison?" "It's 4 in the morning. I'm the family attorney. I need to ensure everything is in order in case—" He paused delicately. "In case the worst happens." He stepped closer to the bed, looking down at Dominic with an expression Cassidy couldn't quite read. Regret, triumph. Something in between. "He's going to wake up." Cassidy's words were a challenge, not a prediction. "We all hope so." Harrison sighed, setting the lilies on the counter. "You know, Cassidy, you should really go home. Get some rest. You've done enough." There was a double meaning in his words, an edge, a warning. "I'm staying right here." Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Loyalty is a commendable trait, Cassidy, until it becomes a liability." He reached into his jacket pocket. Cassidy tensed, expecting a weapon, but he just pulled out another business card and placed it on the table next to the flowers. "If you need anything at all, call me." He turned and left the room, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Cassidy looked at the card. Then she looked at the phone hidden under her hand. She knew who the traitor was, but she was just a former combat medic in a room full of killers. Who would believe her over the family's trusted attorney of 30 years? She needed help. She needed the only person in this world scarier than Dominic. She picked up the hospital room phone and dialed the estate. "Wake up, Eleanor. Tell her I know who tried to kill her son." Eleanor Valente arrived within the hour, moving through the underground hospital's service corridors like a shadow. She wore all black coat, gloves, scarf, and carried her wooden cane, but her posture was rigid with fury barely contained. Cassidy met her outside Dominic's room, holding his phone in trembling hands. "Show me." Eleanor's voice was ice. Cassidy pulled up the message thread explaining the timeline, the forwarded security route, Harrison's access to real-time communications. "He has been family for 30 years. Eleanor's words were slow measured, each one costing her something. "And he sold us. He thinks Dominic is weak." Cassidy's voice shook with anger. "He thinks caring about someone made him vulnerable." Eleanor studied Cassidy in the dim corridor light. The girl from the gala was gone. In her place stood a woman with steel in her spine and blood under her fingernails. And was he right? No. Cassidy's response was immediate. It gave him something worth surviving for. Silence stretched between them. Then Eleanor nodded, a decision crystallizing in her dark eyes. "We tell Harrison that Dominic is waking up. That is how we draw him out." But there was something else Cassidy had noticed in the message threads. Something that made her stomach twist. "Eleanor, there's more. Harrison sent the route to Asset Zero, but I cross-referenced the metadata. Asset Zero replied from a burner phone, but the location ping came from inside the estate. From the security wing." Eleanor's face went pale. "Who has access to that wing?" "Only your top captains. And Sal Romano lives there." The matriarch's hand tightened on her cane until her knuckles went white. "Salvatore has been Dominic's right hand for 20 years. "I know. But look at this." Cassidy pulled up another message, this one from 3 years ago. Encrypted, but Dominic's phone had the keys. Asset Zero asking Harrison about timeline for destabilization. Harrison responding with, "Patience the commission will pay when the job is done." And Asset Zero's final message, "My brother's death will be avenged. 16 years is long enough." Eleanor closed her eyes. Carlo Romano. Sal's younger brother. He died in the Brooklyn expansion 2008. Dominic gave the order that sent him into that firefight. She opened her eyes, and they were hard as obsidian. "We set the trap for Harrison. But we prepare for Sal, too. The next 24 hours were a careful choreography of deception. Eleanor spread word through carefully selected channels that Dominic was showing signs of consciousness, that the doctors were cautiously optimistic, that he might wake within 48 hours. The bait was set. Cassidy stayed in Dominic's room, but now she wasn't alone. Two guards Eleanor trusted, absolutely men who'd served Dominic's father, were positioned in the adjacent supply room, armed, silent, waiting. At 4:12 a.m. on December 29th, the door to Dominic's room moved. Not opened, just shifted slightly, the latch clicking with professional care. Harrison Blackwood slipped inside wearing scrubs he'd stolen from a storage closet. He looked calm, methodical. This wasn't his first assassination. He crossed the room with the confidence of someone who belonged there, who had every right to be near the patient. He locked the door behind him with a soft click. He approached the bed, his eyes on the IV line. In his hand was a syringe filled with clear liquid. Potassium chloride, the silent killer. Injected directly into an IV, it would stop Dominic's heart within minutes. Undetectable in a coma patient. Just another tragic complication. "You chose war for a girl," Harrison murmured to the unconscious man, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your father would have had her killed the moment she became a liability. But you're soft. Just like I told the commission you'd become. She's not just a girl." The voice came from the shadows near the window. Harrison spun. Cassidy stepped into the dim light from the monitors, her phone raised, recording every word and movement. He smiled thinly, the mask slipping just enough to show contempt beneath. "Cassidy. Smart girl. Too smart, actually. That's going to be a problem." He didn't put down the syringe. Instead, he took a step toward her, calculating. He was bigger, older, but she was young, and he'd seen her military file. He'd have to be careful. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. The commission 5 families, they're tired of Valente control. They paid me $5 million to destabilize this empire. Dominic dies, there's a succession war, and they divide the territory. Everyone wins. Everyone except the people who die." Cassidy's hand was steady on the phone. "You killed innocent people. Marco, the driver? He had a family. Collateral damage. This is business, Cassidy. You're a soldier. You understand sacrifice. I understand loyalty. Something you sold for a price." Harrison's expression hardened. He offered her money, 10 million, 20, whatever she wanted. He threatened her sister. He painted a picture of what the commission would do to her if she interfered. "Your sister just got a new kidney, didn't she? Be a shame if complications arose. Transplant rejections happen all the time." Cassidy's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. "You're recording this. You think that matters? The commission owns judges, Cassidy. Evidence disappears. Witnesses disappear." He took another step toward her, the syringe now openly a weapon. "You should have taken the money and run when you had the chance." Then a hand burst from the hospital bedsheets. Dominic's grip crushed Harrison's wrist like it was made of glass. Bones cracked audibly. The syringe fell clattering on the floor and rolling under the bed. Harrison's face went white. He tried to pull away, but Dominic's hold was absolute. Dominic's eyes were open, clear, burning with life and rage. "I was never asleep." His voice was a rasp from the ventilator tube they'd removed an hour ago, rough and damaged, but unmistakably conscious. "I was waiting." The guards burst from the supply room, weapons drawn, but Dominic raised his free hand, a signal to hold position. Harrison begged, promised everything. His words tumbled out in a desperate flood. "The commission, I can give you names. 3 captains on their payroll, offshore accounts in the Caymans, upcoming hits on your ports. I'll testify. I'll wear a wire. Anything, Dominic. Please. Tell me about Asset Zero." Dominic's voice was quiet, almost gentle, more terrifying than any shout. Harrison's eyes darted to the door, calculating odds, but there was no escape. "I don't know what... You've been coordinating with him for 3 years. Every message, every security breach, every piece of intelligence that leaked to Caruso came through you to him. Who is Asset Zero?" Harrison's resistance crumbled. 16 years of planning, and it was ending in a hospital room with a broken wrist and a phone recording his confession. Sal Romano, your underboss. His brother Carlo died in Brooklyn because of your orders. He's been waiting 16 years to destroy you. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain. Not physical, something deeper. How many others? 2 more captains, Marcus and DeLuca. The commission promised them territory when you fell. Dominic listened to it all with the patience of a predator watching prey exhaust itself. Harrison revealed everything: meeting locations, communication protocols, the timeline for the planned succession war. He'd been promised control of the legal operations once the Valente Empire collapsed. A seat at the commission's table. My son. Harrison's voice broke. My son Adrian, he was 26. You sent him into that warehouse fire in 2014. The one you claimed was an accident. But it was a hit on Caruso's drug operation, and you didn't evacuate civilians first. My boy burned to death screaming. Tears streamed down his face. I waited 10 years, Dominic. I became indispensable. I handled your mother's estate, your legal protections, your trusts, and every day I smiled and called you sir, while I planned how to watch everything you built turn to ash. Dominic slowly sat up, groaning with the effort. The gunshot wounds screamed in protest. Blood seeped through his hospital gown, but he didn't seem to notice. I remember the warehouse. I remember your son. I went to his funeral. I paid for his burial. I gave you $300,000. Blood money. Harrison spat. It was war, Harrison. There are always casualties in war. Your son knew the risks. He chose this life. He was an accountant. He was filing papers in the wrong building at the wrong time. The accusation hung in the air, heavy with years of grief and rage. Then you should have blamed Caruso. They set the fire. Dominic's voice was cold, factual. You lit the match by being there. Harrison's logic was twisted by loss, but Cassidy understood it. She'd lost 18 soldiers at Fort Bragg. She knew how guilt and blame could warp reality, how survivors needed someone to punish when the universe offered no justice. My father taught me something. Dominic reached under his pillow. Even injured, even weak, he'd somehow acquired his weapon. The gun appeared matte black and deadly. He said the most dangerous enemy isn't the one in front of you. It's the one you invite to your table, the one you trust with your children's names and your mother's schedule, the one who knows where you sleep. Please, Harrison whispered, I'll disappear. South America. You'll never hear from me again. Just let me live. You killed Marco. You nearly killed my mother. You put a bullet in my back meant for Cassidy. Dominic's finger rested on the trigger. There's no South America far enough. One shot. Clean, professional. The suppressor made it sound like a book slamming shut. Harrison's body crumpled. Dominic tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He collapsed back against the pillows, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. Cassidy was at his side instantly, her hands on his chest, checking vitals with the efficiency of her medical training. You're bleeding again. You tore your sutures. Why didn't you tell me you were awake? Had to be sure he'd come. Had to hear him confess. Dominic's breathing was labored, each word costing him. Did you get it on video? Every word. Every name. Good. Because we're not done. His eyes met hers and she saw the calculation there. The strategy forming even through pain. Sal doesn't know Harrison's dead yet. We can use that. The guards moved Harrison's body, working with practiced efficiency. Within 10 minutes, the room looked untouched. Cassidy helped Dominic back into the hospital bed, reconnecting monitors, adjusting IV lines. You need actual rest now. You're going to kill yourself. Not yet. First we finish this. Dominic grabbed her hand, his grip weak but insistent. I need you to do something. Call Sal. Tell him I'm awake. Tell him I'm asking for him specifically, that I have questions about security protocols. He'll know it's a trap. Number. He'll think I suspect Caruso infiltrated our security. He'll come because he needs to control the narrative. And when he does, Dominic's smile was predatory despite his weakened state. We'll have 2 traitors on record instead of 1. Salvatore Romano arrived at the underground hospital at 6:30 a.m. just as the winter sun was beginning to break over Queens. He came with 2 of his personal guardsmen, loyal to him, not the family. That alone told Cassidy everything she needed to know. Sal looked tired, stressed. The bags under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept since the shooting, guilt or planning impossible to tell which. He rushed to Dominic's bedside, his face a mask of concern that almost looked genuine. "Boss, thank God." We thought his eyes swept over Dominic, cataloging injuries, assessing weakness. "How are you feeling?" "The doctor said you might have permanent nerve damage." "I'll live." Dominic's voice was stronger now, though still rough. "Cassidy, give us the room." Cassidy hesitated, but Dominic's slight nod told her to trust the plan. She stepped into the hallway, leaving the door cracked. The guards. Eleanor's men were positioned in the adjacent room, listening through equipment that would record every word. Sal pulled up a chair, his body language shifting from concerned underboss to something else. Something calculating. "We need to talk about Caruso. He's been hitting our operations while you've been down. 3 shipments intercepted, 2 warehouses burned. He's getting bold. How does he know which shipments to hit?" Dominic asked, his tone casual. "We have a leak, boss. I've been trying to find it, but whoever it is, they're good. Or they're close to me." Dominic let the words hang. Sal's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You think it's one of the captains?" "I think it's someone who has access to real-time security protocols, someone who knew the restaurant exit route, someone who could coordinate with outside contractors without raising suspicion." Sal stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You're right. It has to be someone in the inner circle. Marcus, maybe, or DeLuca. They've been acting nervous. Or you." The room went silent. Sal stopped pacing. He didn't turn around immediately. "Boss, what are you saying I'm saying? Harrison talked before I killed him." 3 hours ago, right in this room." Dominic's voice was steady, watching Sal's back. "He told me about Asset Zero, about the commission's plan, about 3 captains on their payroll. And he told me why." Sal turned slowly. His hand moved toward his waistband. "Don't." Cassidy's voice came from the doorway. She had Harrison's gun retrieved from under the bed after he'd dropped it. It was aimed at Sal's head. "Your men are loyal to Dominic, not you. You move, I drop you. Then his guards drop yours. Nobody wins." Sal looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something that made him pause. This wasn't the scared waitress anymore. This was a soldier who'd seen combat, who'd killed, who wouldn't hesitate. His hand fell to his side. "You murdered my brother." The words came out raw, 16 years of grief finally erupting. Carlo was 23. He was supposed to finish his business degree. But you needed bodies for the Brooklyn expansion. 3 weeks of training and you sent him into a war zone. Caruso's men cut him down in the street like a dog. "I remember Carlo." Dominic's voice was quiet. "I remember every man I've lost. I went to his funeral. I gave your mother money for his burial. I promoted you to honor his sacrifice." Honor? Sal laughed bitterly. "You used that word at his funeral. He died with honor. But there's no honor in dying at 23 because your boss wanted a corner in Brooklyn. There's no honor in watching your mother cry herself to sleep for 5 years. It was war, Sal. We were all soldiers. Carlo knew the risks. He was a kid who worshipped you. He would have walked into hell if you asked. And you did ask. The accusation carried the weight of 16 years. So you waited, rose through the ranks, became my right hand, just to destroy me, to destroy everything you built." Sal's confession was a snarl of pain and vindication. "I wanted you to feel what I felt. Loss, betrayal, helplessness watching someone you love die because of someone else's choices. The commission approached me 3 years ago. I've been feeding them intelligence ever since. Every expansion, every vulnerability, every time you were distracted." He glared at Cassidy. "Like when you brought this waitress into the family. I knew you were getting soft. So I accelerated the timeline. Harrison and I planned the restaurant hit. I made sure your security routes went to Caruso's people. I wanted Vincent to kill you while you were playing protector to your new pet. You leaked the exit route." Cassidy's voice was hard. "Harrison sent the message, but you told him which route to use. You wanted Dominic dead and me alive to watch him bleed out." Sal's smile was ugly. "I wanted you to feel what my mother felt. Helpless. Watching someone die and knowing it's your fault for existing. But it didn't work. Dominic's voice cut through Sal's rage. Because Cassidy didn't freeze, she fought back. She saved my life. And then she did something you never could, she thought, instead of reacted. She found the leak. She caught the traitor. She proved that loyalty isn't about bloodline or history. It's about choosing to stand when everyone else runs. You made me weak, you said, but she made me stronger than I've ever been. Sal's face twisted with something between rage and grief. She's going to get you killed, Dominic. The commission won't stop. They'll send someone else. They'll keep coming until you're dead and the empire is divided. And it's all because you couldn't keep your dick out of the help. Wrong. Dominic slowly sat up, blood seeping through his bandages, but his voice steady. They'll stop because you're going to tell them exactly what happens to traitors in the Valente family. You're going to tell them every name, every account, every plan. And then you're going to sit in a cell knowing you failed, that Carlo's death meant nothing because you threw away 16 years on revenge that didn't even work. You're not going to kill me. Sal seemed surprised. Death is easy. Living with failure is harder. Dominic nodded to the guards who'd emerged from the adjacent room. Take him. Separate cells for his men. I want full interrogation by tonight. As the guards moved to secure Sal, the former underboss looked at Dominic with hollow eyes. You're already dead, Dominic. You just don't know it yet. The commission has resources you can't imagine, and eventually they'll succeed. Maybe. Dominic's voice was tired but certain. But not today. Sal was dragged out, still cursing, still promising Dominic's downfall. When the door closed, Cassidy lowered the gun and rushed to Dominic's side. He'd gone pale, his breathing shallow. You need surgery again. You tore everything open. Worth it. Dominic managed a weak smile. We got both of them. On record. With evidence the commission can't ignore. You're insane. I'm thorough. He touched her face with a hand that trembled from blood loss and exhaustion. You were right. About finding the truth before acting. About thinking instead of reacting. My father would have burned the city down the moment he woke up. But you taught me there's a better way. I didn't teach you anything. You chose to listen. That's the same thing. His eyes started to close. Cassidy. Yeah. When I wake up from the second surgery, we're going to have that talk I promised. The one about how you're not safe with me. Looking forward to it. Good, because I'm going to propose. His hand went limp. The monitors started beeping urgently as his blood pressure dropped. Cassidy hit the emergency call button, her heart pounding, but a small smile played at her lips, despite the fear. He'd just promised her a future in the middle of betrayal and bloodshed. That was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. 1 year to the day after the Winter Gala, the plaza hosted another charity ball. Same ballroom, same ice sculptures, same orchestra playing forgettable classical pieces. But the guest list had changed. Cassidy entered on Dominic's arm. She wore black, a sleek gown that cost more than her old apartment's annual rent. Her hair was up in an elegant twist. The Valente family ring glinted on her left hand alongside a diamond engagement ring that had belonged to Dominic's grandmother. They'd married quietly 6 months ago. No big wedding, just Eleanor Meredith and a priest in the estate's chapel. Simple, private, theirs. Dominic had fully recovered, though mornings were still difficult and cold weather made his back ache where the bullets had done their damage. The limp was gone, replaced by his original predatory grace, but Cassidy knew the cost. She'd been there for every painful step of physical therapy, every night when the nightmares about betrayal woke him in cold sweats. The crowd parted for them. Not out of politeness, out of fear and respect intertwined. Eleanor followed behind them, regal as ever, holding court like the queen mother she was. She carried her wooden cane more for show than necessity now. Cassidy's strict medication regimen and exercise routine had given the matriarch 5 more years of vitality at least. Meredith attended too healthy and radiant on Luca's arm. The young captain treated her like precious crystal. He'd been promoted to head of security after proving his loyalty during the purge that followed Sal's arrest. Mary looked nothing like the gray dying girl from a year ago. Her kidney transplant had been successful. She'd started college courses online and was talking about medical school, wanting to help people the way Cassidy had helped her. They were announced formally. Mr. and Mrs. Dominic Valente. The room buzzed with whispers. Everyone knew the story how a waitress had become a mafia queen, how she'd uncovered conspiracies, survived assassination attempts, and restructured an empire. The commission had been forced to pay $50 million in blood money after Sal's testimony revealed their involvement. 3 captains were executed by their own families for the dishonor of betrayal. The 10-year truce was signed in blood, literally old-school style, ensuring peace in the 5 boroughs. The Valente family was stronger than ever. Near the coat check, Anastasia Thornhill worked in a simple black uniform. Her influencer career had imploded spectacularly after the viral video. 2 million followers became 200 within weeks. Sponsors dropped her. Her father's company disowned her publicly to save their reputation. She'd declared bankruptcy 8 months ago. The only job she could get was here at the plaza checking coats for people who used to beg for her attention. Cassidy stopped in front of her. Anastasia's face went pale, then red, shame and fear warring for dominance. Cassidy leaned close, her voice low and almost kind. "Careful with the coats. The staff works very hard here. They deserve respect." She walked away without waiting for a response. No revenge, no gloating. Just a quiet reminder that actions had consequences and karma kept perfect records. The ballroom felt different now. A year ago, Cassidy had been invisible furniture in polyester. Tonight, every eye tracked her movement. Conversations paused when she passed. Men bowed slightly. Women smiled with genuine respect instead of dismissive pity. She was Cassidy Valente now, consigliere of the family. Eleanor had made it official 6 months ago in a ceremony that involved blood oaths and ancient Italian rites that predated the American mob by centuries. Dominic led her to the dance floor. The orchestra began a waltz, the same one they'd played last year, though Cassidy had been too busy serving champagne to notice. "You're thinking too loud." His voice was amused as they began to move their bodies in perfect synchronization. "I'm thinking that a year ago I was serving champagne in this room, invisible, desperate, counting coins for my sister's medicine, and now you're the most dangerous woman in New York." "I'm not dangerous," Cassidy protested, though she didn't quite believe it anymore. "You brought down a 30-year conspiracy, Cassidy. You outmaneuvered men who've been playing this game since before you were born. You command respect from killers. That's the definition of dangerous." They moved across the polished marble where Eleanor had fallen, where everything had changed, where a simple act of kindness had rewritten both their futures. "Do you regret it?" Dominic asked quietly. "Helping my mother that night, knowing where it would lead?" Cassidy looked up at him. His dark eyes were soft now, vulnerable in a way he only allowed with her. "Not for a second. You falling for a waitress who wouldn't take my money and told me to put a coat on." Dominic smiled a real smile, rare and devastating. "Best decision I never made. You decided for both of us." The dance ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom, though Cassidy suspected it was more protocol than genuine appreciation. As they left the floor, Eleanor approached with champagne flutes on a silver tray carried by a waiter, but presented by the matriarch herself. "To family," she raised her glass. "To survival," Dominic added. "To kindness." Cassidy finished. They drank. Across the room, a photographer captured the moment, 3 generations of power bound by blood and choice and fire. Later, when the speeches had been made and the donations pledged and the orchestra had played its final set, Cassidy and Dominic slipped away to a private balcony overlooking Central Park. The December air was cold, their breath visible in small clouds. The city stretched out before them, a kingdom of lights and shadows they'd fought to protect. Dominic wrapped his coat around her shoulders, the same gesture from a year ago, but this time there was no argument, just acceptance. "Can't sleep?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Too much thinking. About how a year ago I was counting coins for dialysis. Now I'm running criminal enterprises and planning legitimate business expansions and sitting in meetings with people who terrify me. Do you want out?" The question was serious. He'd let her go if she asked. She knew that with certainty. "No, I want to understand why I don't want out. Because you found where you belong." Dominic's voice was certain, wrapping around her like warmth. You spent your whole life taking care of people, soldiers, your sister, strangers who didn't deserve your kindness. For the first time, you're with people who take care of you back, who value what you bring, who see you. Is that what this is? Cassidy turned to face him. Family? It's what we make it. Blood doesn't determine family. Loyalty does. Sacrifice does. Choice does. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle despite the calluses from weapons and violence. You dove into broken glass for my mother when 200 people stood back and laughed. You took bullets, or would have, for me. You dismantled a conspiracy because you believed in us. That's family, Cassidy, the realest kind there is. She leaned into his touch, finally allowing herself to accept what she'd been fighting for months, that this brutal, dangerous world had become home, that these broken people had become hers, that the monster who'd claimed her life had given her a life worth living. I love you. The words came out simple, honest, complete. Dominic's breath caught. For a man who faced death without flinching, those 3 words seemed to undo him completely. I've loved you since the moment you refused my money and told me helping people wasn't a transaction. Since you looked at me at the Reaper, the monster everyone fears, and saw just a man who needed someone to care whether he lived or died. I care. I know. That's why I'm still alive. They kissed under the winter stars, the city's lights glittering below them like a kingdom they'd built together from ashes and blood and impossible choices. From inside the ballroom they could hear the final notes of the orchestra, the chatter of guests beginning to leave, the clink of glasses being collected. But out here there was only silence and starlight, and the warmth of 2 people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and chosen to make it work anyway. In the distance a siren wailed police or ambulance, impossible to tell. The city never slept. The war never truly ended. There would always be threats, always be challenges, always be people who wanted to tear down what they'd built. But tonight on this balcony, they were just Dominic and Cassidy. Not the Reaper and the consigliere, just 2 people who'd saved each other when saving seemed impossible. They said kindness was weakness. Cassidy spoke softly, her head resting against Dominic's chest where she could feel his heartbeat steady, strong, alive. They were wrong. Kindness was the first act of war. The bravest thing I ever did. And what was that? Dominic asked, his arms tightening around her, kneeling in broken glass for a stranger. Everything else followed from that one choice. Everything else followed from you being you. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. The world needs more people willing to kneel in broken glass. It's just lucky I found the one who did it for my mother. You found me. I found you. We found each other. Cassidy closed her eyes, committing this moment to memory. The cold air, the distant sirens, the warmth of being held, the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. A year ago she'd been a waitress who saved a stranger. Tonight she was a queen who'd earned her crown on her knees in broken glass, refusing to look away from suffering when everyone else did. They'd said kindness was weakness. They'd said loyalty was currency. They'd said monsters couldn't love. They were wrong about everything, and Cassidy Valente had the empire to prove it.